Hi everybody, welcome to IndyCar on Thursday, and it is today the 20th of June. Okay, today's subject is a thing which I've spoken about before, which is a thing called cognitive dissonance. Right, sounds like a very big load of psychobabble, but basically what this describes is the feeling that something that you've believed to be a solid fact and an irrefutable fact of life for all of your life, you suddenly discover that the reality of it is the opposite of what you thought. Somehow or other, the reality that you see in front of you does not agree with what you've been conditioned to accept. The cognitive dissonance is a way of describing that feeling. Now, the reason I mention this today is that because of the current contest to choose the next leader of the Tory party, it's worth pointing out how cognitive dissonance is going to affect both Brexit, the issue of Scottish independence, and the survival of England after Brexit. For the last decades, however many it is, ever since television and radio, in fact even before that, in the print media, the United Kingdom has kept Scotland in check by, first of all, outnumbering Scots at Westminster, so we can't have any power. That was the first means of control. However, there is a soft means of control as well, which was by using the media to describe Scotland as a pauper state, a country which was almost bankrupt, and in which the people lived on the breadline and had no hope other than the redemption offered by being part of this wonderful United Kingdom. And that mythology has grown over maybe 200 more years into what it is now, which is this idea of Great Britain or the United Kingdom, which is promulgated all across the British media in England and in Scotland. But the stories told in England and the stories told in Scotland are different. The stories told in England tell of a Scottish race, if you like, Scottish people who are on their knees, who run around in kilts, live in mud huts, basically have very few amenities, get drunk often, drink far too much, die young, have lots of health problems, smoke too much, gamble too much, and take drugs. Basically, every vice under the sun is attributed to Scots in this racial stereotyping that's been going on for decades. On the BBC, this manufactured vision, this racial view and stereotype of Scottish people as some kind of second-class citizens who exist on the breadline and have to go cap in hand to London for handouts, has been perpetuated by the BBC for decades. Most recently, the BBC tends to do things like it will only report bad news. Scotland's health service is failing. It's not meeting targets. People are drinking too much. Survey after survey, freedom of information request after freedom of information request. Every single day there's this drip feed of you're unhealthy, you drink too much drugs, too much gambling, social problems, poverty, food banks. It goes on and on and on. Eventually you find yourself feeling convinced that this is the truth. In actual fact, if you look around you every day, you'll see that's not the truth. On the other side of Hadrian's Wall, a different story is told. The story of Scotland, the spongers, Scots, the layabouts, the feckless, the drunkards, the drug addicts, the people who are dying young, the people who are not looking after themselves, the people who can't find and hold a job. We are viewed as lazy, and we're viewed as grievance-ridden and angst-ridden, and also we're now presented as English-hating. This is the next thing that we're being accused of. Now, all of this soft control is exercised through the media, and it's designed to condition people in different parts of the so-called United Kingdom to believe conflicting things, completely opposite things. In fact, English people are conditioned to believe that we are something we're not. We are being conditioned to agree with that, to actually think of ourselves as being as bad as we're portrayed in England. And yet the news media tells different stories on different sides of Hadrian's Wall. There was one in which there were newspaper headlines which were radically different. They described an increase in prices in England as being a great thing, and an increase in prices in Scotland as being a bad thing. And this is what I mean. This is the way that we have been manipulated, and our views have been manipulated for decades. The problem now is that people's views have been manipulated in such a way that English voters now believe Boris Johnson is the only possible person who can get Great Britain, in inverted commas, out of the European Union. Poll after poll has now shown that this conditioning that the English establishment has been doing to its own people has now resulted in English people actually thinking, 63% of them incidentally, thinking that losing Northern Ireland is a price worth paying to get Brexit. Losing Scotland breaking away from the United Kingdom, is a worthwhile loss if it gets them Brexit. And not only that, but severe damage to the economy. Still, 62% of English people believe that is a price worth paying to get out of the European Union. And finally, and this was the one that shocked me, about 57% of Tory voters said that they would prefer to have Brexit, even if it meant the destruction of the Tory party. Now, think about that one for a minute. That's a weird one. They actually believe that having Brexit is more important than the party that they support. They're willing to destroy the Tory party to obtain Brexit. This is a fascinating dissonance, because what's going to happen now when Boris Johnson is finally crowned the king of Brexit land, and he tries to go to Europe and he tries to negotiate, and they knock him back, and we end up with the no-deal Brexit, English voters are going to be faced with the bare truth of the matter, which is not that the Scots have been sponging off England for the last couple of 100 years, but that Scotland has been propping up the English economy since at least before World War One. Records go all the way back actually to before World War One, and then they stopped around about 1922, when it was shown that almost half of the tax receipts in Scotland, sometimes as much as 60% of Scotland's taxes, were being taken and spent in England, leaving the Scots less than half of what they actually earned in taxation to run their own country on. After a while, that looked a bit embarrassing, so they had to stop that. But now what's happened is that Brexit has appeared. And Brexit was a monster that was created by the Conservative Party itself. By giving the right wing of the Conservative Party enough manoeuvring space to gather more support for leaving the European Union, they have now accidentally blundered themselves into forcing the whole of the United Kingdom to leave its nearest and largest trading bloc, for no other reason than racism. That's it. Immigration, racism. That was what it was about. Boris Johnson has been accused of being a racist by Ian Blackford in Parliament. And you know, the outrage and the shock of that amongst the Tory party wasn't because he'd been called out as a racist, but because he'd been called out as a racist inside Parliament. And basically, you're allowed to be a racist in Parliament, but you're not allowed nobody's allowed to actually call you a racist. Outside of Parliament, they could call you a racist. Inside the Parliament, they can't. So the outrage from the Tory party is that anybody would have the bare-faced cheek to call Boris Johnson out on being an anti-Scottish racist, which he actually is. Anyway, let's get back to the point. The point is, we're now coming up to the period of time when Brexit is about to happen. At this point, the Scots have said, we are not going. 62% of us are staying. English people are saying, 63% of English people are saying, we don't give a toss if you leave, we want Brexit. So the two countries' populations believe opposite things at the same time. Scotland is going to leave England to Brexit because we're not going to stick around. We're going to have our vote yes, leave, stay in the EU ourselves. That will leave England about £30 billion a year worse off. For a start, that's just from the taxation alone. £30 billion a year out of their budget gone. We're basically taking 10% of the value of the British economy with us. And that leaves England with 90% of its economy intact and only 90 pence in the pound left. So the value of their pound is going to plummet off a cliff edge. Scotland walks away with what its geographic share is of North Sea oil. We're not going to be giving it to England anymore, because England has said they don't care if Scotland leaves. In fact, they want us to leave if it means they get Brexit. We're holding them back, remember? So having created this illusion amongst English people that Scottish people are beggars and we are a great big drain on English taxes, English voters are happy to see the back of us. 63% of them want us gone. 63% of them want Northern Ireland gone. And another 62% said they don't care whether it destroys the Tory party. 62% of them said they don't care if it damages the economy severely in England. And 57% of them said they don't care whether it destroys the Tory party in the process. So English people are prepared to lose Scotland, Ireland, most of their economy and the Conservative Party to get their Brexit. But that's because they think that England has a fantastic economy. We know that it doesn't. We know that we've been propping it up with nearly half of our tax money every year since records were kept way back in the 1900s. That's when they started keeping records of how much we were paying to England to keep their economy afloat. And we were making a fortune for them. We were the manufacturing centre of the empire. Glasgow wasn't called the second city of empire for nothing. It was a major manufacturing centre. Just as Beijing and China and Guangdong are now, Scotland was then. So now we find this strange situation where Boris Johnson has got to try to explain to England after Brexit why the economy is crashing, why the pound's only worth 90 pence, and why Scotland seems to be doing so much better than England and is trading all its oil freely, and everybody in Scotland is wealthy and they don't have to pay for their health service, they don't pay for their prescriptions, or their fuel costs are lower, their taxes are lower, etc. The cognitive dissonance of Brexit crashing into reality. The reality being that Scotland is not the cap in hand beggar. Scotland is not the country that is the burden on England. It's the reverse. The English economy is catatonic. Without Scotland propping it up for the last few decades with, first of all, oil money, and now with our international earnings, the English economy would tank. So, eventually, what will happen is Boris Johnson, the racist, Nigel Farage, the other racist, who wants rid of all immigrants, they'll close the doors to everybody, even Scotland, even Ireland, maybe even Wales eventually, who knows. And England will be left with a wall around it. Nobody gets in, nobody gets out, and there's no investment going into England. It's all heading north of the border, where Scotland, Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic are all trading happily from inside the EU as a part of the 28, or in fact might even be 29 if Northern Ireland becomes an independent little statelet, who knows. But the Celtic states become part of the European Union, and England is left, well, basically with the truth of the matter that it will have to support itself with what it's got, and what it's got is not very much. English television programmes have a great deal of trouble finding big, successful exporting companies that actually are English. Most of them are foreign-owned, who've been brought in, car companies, electronics firms, things like that. Nothing to do with England, no indigenous work being produced, no English registered companies. Very hard for them to find exporting companies to showcase because they have so few manufacturers and so few exporters. It's very difficult for English television shows to present an attractive picture of England as an exporting nation. So I guess what I'm saying today is that it doesn't matter really who the Prime Minister is of England. If Brexit goes ahead, Scotland will be leaving. If Scotland leaves, English people will find out the truth. And the truth is quite simple, that they have been subsidised by the Scots since at least the beginning of the 19th century. Maybe longer, it's very difficult to tell because records weren't kept all the way back, but certainly from about 1900 onwards, let's say, all the way through the 20th century and into the 21st century, Scotland is still subsidising a weak English economy. It's still pumping its own tax money into England, and England is only giving us back approximately half of what we actually earn in taxation. So I think a wake-up call is in order. People of England, if you want rid of Scotland, go right ahead. That's great. We'll be on our way. No hard feelings. You go and make it by yourselves with America. If you want to be the 51st state of the United States, that's fine. Unfortunately, all your trident nuclear weapons will need to be moved out of our territory and into your own ports, because we won't be hosting those anymore. And all of our oil platforms and all of our oil fields will be annexed to us. And we will have a navy out there guarding them against any incursions by anybody claiming to own them. Because they don't belong to England, they never did. They've always been in the Scottish sector. Scotland has a tremendous amount of wealth, and we have been handing it over to England since about 1900. We've been giving it away to you, and eventually when you get your Brexit, you'll discover the truth. And the truth is that you've been lied to for about 100 years. And it's sad, really, because I have a lot of English friends who've been fooled by this. Scotland's woken up. We know that we're not the poor man of Europe. We know we're not the sick man of Europe. We also know that we're not begging England for handouts, that we're actually giving England handouts because you need it. Your economy is a mess. Your economy is based almost entirely in London, and it's almost based entirely on white-collar, middle-class banking and insurance and investment jobs. That's fine. If you want to do that, you go right ahead. Become a tax haven, become an international banking centre, become like Monte Carlo if you want. But we'll go our own way. We have our own plans to make. But you're going to find out very soon just how badly you have been lied to by your own leaders. Ian Blackford said that Boris Johnson was racist. And he had to be racist. Boris Johnson was elected on a racist ticket. Keep the brown people out of England. Keep the immigrants out. Send them back where they came from. The letterboxes. What was it he called them? The watermelon smiles. The pickaninnies. These are the terms that Boris Johnson uses to describe Africans, Asians, Pakistanis, Muslims, anybody that he doesn't like the look of. They are swept aside with these racist, pejorative terms. Even Scotland, even Ireland, we get the racism. We're the sweaty socks, we're the jocks. The Irish are the paddies, or some worse slur is given to them. Even the poor Welsh, the taffies, right? Taken for granted, again, to the Westminster elite, the Welsh are peasants as well. Well, I'm afraid the peasants have revolted, and we're going to keep doing that until you get the message. We won't be sticking around for Brexit. Scotland will be leaving the UK. The UK can go its own way. England can do what it likes with America. It can have its own private medicine. It can get rid of its NHS. It can let people starve. That's the way it's going. That's what it wants. That's what people have voted for. That's what the Conservative way is. Survival of the fittest, survival of the greediest, and survival of the wealthiest. Everybody else can go hang. That's the Tory mantra. Greed is good. Greed's what drives growth. That's what England is, and that's what it wants to become. Scotland's got different ideas. Very different ideas. We're not going the same way. So the cognitive dissonance is going to be felt by English voters when we leave. Suddenly they're going to wake up and, the FTSE share index is going to be in the red and plunging like they've never seen it before. The value of shares is going to be way down. The value of the pound is going to plunge. It will be a mess. And frankly, when they see it and they wake up and see the damage that they've done, they will regret it. But they will have done it themselves. Scotland's not responsible for Brexit. We said don't do it. We said it's stupid, it's self-inflicted damage you're going to cause, you shouldn't do it. We're not doing it. But they wouldn't listen. They'd rather listen to the Tories. So, I'm sorry, but they've made their bed, they're going to have to lie in it. I'll see you all later in the week. I'll be back again tomorrow. Tonight I'm presenting Scotland at 7 on Broadcasting Scotland. Watch out for us on live stream and also on YouTube. I'll see you all later. Bye for now.